Welcome to Life Planning 101, brought to you by Smart Money Group and Kennedy Financial Services in Eastland, Texas. Tune in every week as we share important information to help you and your family live life on purpose. Insurance, investments, legacy and tax planning, and much more. All covered now on Life Planning 101.
Here we are with another episode of Black and White Market Chatter on Life Planning 101. Matt, Ervin, and Aaron Kennedy with you today. Our long episode today, Aaron. We got a lot to talk about and a lot to share. But first, I want to congratulate Lake. He's out there. I guess he's really on the lake right now, trying to get some fishing in. State tournament, is that right?
Yes, he's absolutely out there right now. Yes, it's a state tournament. We're at Sam Raymer Lake at state fishing tournament.
Great. Well, if he happens to keep any, be sure to share with the rest of the class. So,
all right.
Yeah.
If they'll let us bring them on, I'll do that.
Pretty awesome. Well, so today we want to talk to you about a couple of things. One of them is planning horizon. There's so much going on today, and it's really kind of crazy because most people aren't thinking 2 years or 10 days down the road. But I heard some interesting statistics the other day about living. Was it if you're alive in 2030, you'll live to age 100?
Yes. And I know some people have heard me talk about this before, and I got this from Rick Edelman. And I first heard him speak about this, I think it was either 2019, 2020, somewhere around in that area. And it was just fascinating, and we're not prepared. We're really not prepared. And, I came across a podcast, and it was actually Rick Edelman, and he was talking about the same stuff. And I was like, here it is. Everybody can hear it. Listen to what he has to say. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, quite interesting, because, insurance companies notoriously are known for being right, because they're in the business of, keeping people insured and providing death claims for not going out of business. And so it wasn't very many years ago that a lot of the policies, some policies were maturing at age 90. And now all the policies that we see, permanent policies, these are not term policies, they target a maturity date of 120. And so with the thought that if people are going to start living to 100, now you would assume that that's only going to get longer. The longevity is going to get better due to technology and medical care. What's the next planning horizon? So it's kind of interesting to unpack there.
Yes, it is. And let's go from the beginning about all the changes that are happening in healthcare. And I know we've all been through quite a bit since 2020, and a lot of the new health stuff coming out is a little bit scary. But even if we put that aside, look at the technology we have for replacing huge bodies, or bones, or organs. The nanoprocessor that we can put into paraplegics to help them think, to move. Technology is moving so fast. We will get to the point that life expectancy is way beyond where it is now. But if we get to that point, what happens to Social Security? You already brought up life insurance. What about the money that you're living on? Are you going broke safely, expecting that it runs out when you do at 85? These are all things that, we're not ready. In 2030, I was writing this to everybody last night, and I was like, if he's half right, we've got some serious changes to make now. We've got to start thinking differently. This is spooky. That's a long time.
It really is. And that's where, thinking, what do you do to prepare? How do you even prepare to live that long? But one of the things, going back to some of that medical technology, they're even talking about using some of those nanoprocessors. The example that they used was the technology used to be a computer was the size of a room, get it down to a desktop, get it down to a laptop, get it down to an Apple Watch, so small. And then it's going to be the size of a grain of rice, which is similar to what they're doing with in the quadriplegics. And they're actually doing like an exoskeleton, right? So that just made me instantly think of Avatar, right? It's not just, it's allowing people to carry more, to be more productive. And so people may even be able to work longer. Right. So it may not just be that I'm retired for maybe I'm not retired for 60 years anymore, maybe or 40 years, maybe I'm retired, but I take a part-time job and no longer is that ability to lift 50 pounds a restriction.
Yeah, good point. And so, I mean, just think about that. What if you're 70 in the year 2030? You don't have quite the body that you had when you're 40s or 30s, but hey, go throw on your exoskeleton. Now you're a 22-year-old kid. You can move and jump and run and lift whatever you want to. And if you slide it on like a jacket and a pair of pants and you're ready to go, you're back to a teenager.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to think about.
It really is fascinating. And so with that, but people trying to think, past that mark of, I'm 70 now, it's 2030 and I'm 70 and there's a high likelihood that I live another 30 years. People are having a hard time planning 2 weeks right now, let alone 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, it's a big difference. How do we plan for this?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways in the market to do that. And I think it's important to understand, we have to understand why we're not thinking this way. And you can, Aaron, you can attest to this. I was something the other day. People are living in extremes right now, right? They're living in, we joke, it's YOLO, right? So in 2020, everybody had a fear. We were faced with a virus. We had to address it appropriately. It was very impactful on so many things that we do. Well, now in 2023, well, heck, recession doesn't seem that bad, does it? We can all have a party to celebrate recession at least. So people are, the threat is so much different and the spending's still high. They're living the YOLO lifestyle. It's so trying to get people to shift their mindset to say, this too shall pass, right? You can't keep spending aggressively. We need to be thinking about living to 100 or 100 plus,
Yes. I mean, we actually went from a point that we were all going to die. We were told that, and now it's like, hey, I just made it through one of the worst times in history. If I can beat death, I can beat anything, and let's go. That's the mentality. That's exactly right. It can come back anytime. What if death comes tomorrow? I might as well spend everything and have a great time.
Well,
hey guys, come on.
You can't take it with you, and there's several clients that we meet with that say, if I live that long, I'm just going to spend it all. We try to help people think through the tomorrows, because there's no way that you can think of all the things that could ever come against you in life, right? And none of us are perfect,
Right.
But we've worked and helped keep several people retired over the years. Just, a few of them, I guess. There's so many families that we work with, and we're some of their experiences as well. So when we look at it, we say, well, these things could happen because we've seen it happen, where some people can't fathom it. So there's clients constantly say, I never thought I'd live this long. Well, they're still healthy. It's like, okay, so how do we help you make, kind of that shifting goal line? We touched on Social Security. We can circle back to that, but that longevity is kind of a shifting goal. You might have to run a couple more plays to stay on track to get a touchdown versus being, an indoor field that's a lot shorter.
Think about that. If you're living to 100, what are the odds that you're going to run through a period in history that we have high inflation, that your money is drained away very, very quickly? What is the chances that you're going to live through a point of history where there is a huge natural disaster in your area, or a huge disaster in our country like 9/11, or all these things? So you've got to get your assets to grow and last every bit as long as you do, and make it through the ups and the downs.
Right.
And you can't really do that safely for, if we're looking at a 40 to 60 year time frame. Your assets has got to last a long time. And I'm not saying taking stupid risk, but you just think, if you're in a traditional 60-40 portfolio, you're doubling your money over 12 years or so. Hey, milk just tripled in price in a year. What do you do?
Well, you have to wait about 4 more years to drink milk, Aaron. That's the answer.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Almond milk hopefully didn't go up much, but but you got to plan for this. So maybe you stretch out and you become more comfortable with your risks that you're taking. Maybe start doubling your portfolio every 9 years, or just trying to push it up a little bit. Or, we got to get our mind okay with ups and downs, as long as it's there 10 years from now and it's grown and getting close to that double during that point. You got to get your mind to be comfortable with that. So no crazy risk, but you can't take stupid no risk. Can't go broke safely.
Well, that's right. You cannot go broke safely. And it's kind of an interesting concept because so many of the people that we follow, I know you've read it, I've read it too. The 60-40 retirement portfolio is gone. Gone meaning that it no longer works. And it was very interesting because they touched on that. Rick Edelman and the gentleman that he spoke with, they touched on the fact that when you think of plans, and so often advisors use 85 or age 90 as their planning time horizon and say, you're in great shape. And we even see it with when we help someone log in to their 401k to help them with an allocation. They'll log in and they'll say, hey, it says right here that I could have, XYZ dollars a month for retirement. And so we start looking at the fine print. It says, yes, if you stay invested at, an 8% return and you have a 75-year time horizon, your money will, last breath, last dollar. I said, yes. Okay. So if you want to live to age 75, that's what you can take out. So meaning the 60-40 was geared so much for a shorter planning horizon. So we have to make hay when the sun's shining. We have to stock our vegetables the years that they make for future years, right?
That's exactly right.
When you think about how quick money doubles, so let's look at that negative interest rate environment, because there's been countries in this world that have shifted to that model, and some pretty prominent countries, and you can speak better to that than I. But what I'm saying is cash looks pretty good. Flat looks pretty good in a negative interest rate environment. But how quick does cash double?
Good gosh.
So think.
At zero, it never does.
There you go.
One,
thank you.
72 years.
Right. So if you're gonna, so we're talking about the need to double your money. Let's call it an average of 10 years, right? Just a good average. You can get a double every 10 years. Well, that could be okay. But if you get a double every 72 years, I don't know. I mean, respectfully, some people may never see their money double. To go backwards, to lose, we've always modeled inflation at about, 2 to 4%, depending on the category. Some are more aggressive than that, like medical and education are high inflationary. Other just a broad-based inflation is not typically that high year over year long-term average, right? You have bouts of high inflation like we're living now. So to go back to what you said earlier, will you ever see a high inflationary environment? Well, we're living it, and some folks have seen it twice. And so if you live another 15, 20, 30 years, you'll probably see a third one, I'm sure, somewhere in the mix. So we need to start looking at opportunities, and opportunities are coming in so many different ways. We touched on that, the ability to potentially work longer with the technology. So to go back, that technology that's there. And I think one of the things to remember, one of the big, ahas for me, listening through that podcast was, you can't put your head in the sand, like you just noted, and you can't be closed-minded to new things. That doesn't mean you have to play the fad, right? There's a difference. You make logical sense. One of the things that was important to think about was they talked about the people that didn't accept the Model T at first. Well, it doesn't have any headlights. It doesn't have any windows. It's dusty. It's bumpy. And so the carriage and buggy guys were anti-car. Well, look at us now. Cars are innovative, and now they fly. Personal flying vehicles, such like that. And something more recent that we can wrap our head around is, Blockbuster would laugh Netflix out of the room, of the negotiation room, and then look at now. Kodak, that's something we're very familiar with. They made reference to Kodak didn't adopt some of the technology that Instagram did because it didn't fit.
They sold it to Instagram.
Yeah, and then Instagram turned around and I forget $2 billion, sold their company for $2 billion with 14 employees, and Kodak went bankrupt that year with 150 employees. So we got to stay open-minded. Now, it doesn't mean blindly accept everything that's true, but we also have to be forward-thinking, because with a field goal that's moving, that extended planning horizon, we have to think differently, because where we could accept certain risks and then we disregarded other risks, that is flip-flopping. Longevity risk is becoming much more prevalent than it once was.
And you can do this at different risk levels. Even if you can accept the idea that technology is changing, we can go into a broad-based technology index or something like that with a very small portion, just knowing technology is changing. Mm-hmm. If you're a super aggressive person, then maybe you could go out there and, hey, I'm going to build a small portfolio of AI companies. I'm going to build a small portfolio of biotech companies. You know, even if you're keeping this at 2 to 3% of your portfolio, you can get as aggressive as you want or stay as broad-based as you want. You just got to have the acceptance that times change. And times are changing. We all know that. It's just scary.
It reminds me of something that we talked about before. And, it was more of a mindset switch. So I think it falls right into play about, it says you can always tell how wealthy someone is by the time frame for which they speak. When we're kids, it's, hey, I need my allowance Friday so I can go to the movies on Saturday. And as we grow as adults, it's always like, okay, I'm going to, save over the next 6 to 12 months so I can have a down payment next year for my house. And then as we grow even more, I need my retirement assets to grow over the next 10 years. That way I can spend the next 30 years retired. So as that timeline shifts, we think your wealth changes, so when we stay in that, well, I need my...
I love that. I've never heard that before. That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. So it's just kind of wrapping your head around perception, because people that are patient often get paid to wait. And right now we're really, really trying hard to find ways for folks to get paid, whether that be, capturing some interest rates, getting some yield, some dividend payers that are kind of designed to grow through the madness, getting paid to wait, but having that patience, because if we're trading on every little bit of news, we're going to get lost in the shuffle. And with that, every bit of news, what about the job numbers?
Not good. If you read the news, they're fantastic. But you know what? There's been lots of reports of lots of fraud. Lots of fraud. If y'all can believe this, people are getting unemployment insurance and they don't need it. Think about this. There is actually lots of evidence out there that our job market is actually stronger than what is being put out there. If our job market is stronger and consumers are still spending like drunken sailors, what kind of risk are we looking at? If the majority of our is the consumer and there's more jobs that people have that we know about and they're still spending, where's that pushing our economy?
Yeah, we're hotter and hotter, right?
Yeah. There's a big risk that the economy is going to be okay. Everybody's talking about the recession right now. Yeah. Right? We know the recession. The money supply is shrinking for the first time since the 70s. The same thing that helped the market grow during COVID, the trillions of dollars that were flooding into the market, trillions of dollars are flooding out right now. Money supply is shrinking. That's a risk. Everybody's planning for it. Everybody knows the risk is there and everybody's planning for it. What's the likelihood that it's going to happen?
Right. If everybody knows about it, there's probably no surprise there.
Yeah. Surprised in. Everybody's scared to death. How much money's on the sidelines right now waiting for the big crash? What happens if it never comes?
Well, and think about this too, and you may have run the numbers, I haven't, but how much money even for us have we pulled in for folks trying to help them get brokered CDs, diversify FDIC risk? We've done that. We've pulled it in, done cash management for people. It doesn't mean we took more risk than the bank. It just means we helped probably mitigate some of it. And some of that, for some people, that will be market investment when the time is right.
Yes.
So extrapolate that out
Think
across
about all
other advisors.
The money coming in. That could be really big for all the money on the sidelines, all the CDs, all the cash. Got to go somewhere eventually.
There's a lot to that. And the biggest thing is for folks that we can do something for, because we can't control that. We can't control what the Fed does. I don't know if anybody's ever been able to. And Powell seems to be on a mission. So we're going to let him be on a mission. But the biggest thing that we can do, so we focus on what we have available at our fingertips. So if we know that our time horizon just shifted 15, 20 years, and we know that interest rates are paying decent amount right now, we got to get that working. And then we need to be ready to take an appropriate amount of risk. And I say it like that because for everyone, it's different. Everybody has different goals, objectives, and a risk tolerance. And we can't be naive to that. But we have to be willing to take an appropriate amount of risk to meet our goal. And that's really difficult to navigate alone, right? You and I obviously have studied a lot of hours and spent a lot of time with the clients about trying to develop strategies. But it's hard to believe that there's people actually trying to be out there right now doing it on their own. I don't know that I would ever try to replace my knee or do shoulder surgery on my own. But it's just, when you put it in that context, people try to navigate these waters, and some mistakes, when you make some mistakes, they're irreversible and missed opportunities. And that's our biggest hope, because so much of this is a moving timeline. We know the technology is coming. We know that there's going to be opportunities, and there always has been. There's always opportunities for people that think the market's going to go up. There's always opportunities for people who think the market's going to go down. So as long as you're seizing those opportunities, but in a intelligent, thoughtful, risk-adjusted way, you're going to be okay. Anyways, Aaron, I think we're running out of time today. Before we get wrapped up, is there any last minute items you want to touch on? Planning horizon, or some of the technology or opportunities or longevity, or things that we're doing? Is there anything you want to wrap up with today?
No, not really. I hope we created a spark today. This kind of stuff really fired up. I love it. So if you're listening, you have questions, you want to talk about it, steps to move forward, holler at us. Love to talk about it. Got tons of ideas. Please reach out. Love to hear from you.
Yep. And too, if you have any ideas about things you want to hear about, we'd love to hear from you and take advantage of that and walk you through it as close as we can. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for listening and participating with us each week here on Life Planning 101. And hope you have just a wonderful weekend. And Aaron, best of luck as you wrap up the tournament there. Black and White Market Chatter on Life Planning 101.
Thank you for joining us for Life Planning 101, brought to you by Smart Money Group and Kennedy Financial Services. If you have questions, you can email them to lifeplanning@kennedy-financial.com. Don't forget to learn how our sister company can assist you with all of your tax, bookkeeping, and consulting needs. You can find out more at briscoeandassociates.com. Be sure to tune in next week for more Life Planning 101. The opinions expressed herein are those of the firm and are subject to change without notice. The opinions referenced are as of the date of publication and are subject to change due to changes in the market or economic conditions and may not necessarily come to pass. Any opinions, projections, or forward-looking statements expressed herein are solely those of the author, may differ from the views or opinions expressed by other areas of the firm, and are only for general informational purposes as of the date indicated. Securities offered through Calton & Associates Incorporated, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Smart Money Group LLC. Kennedy Financial Services and Smart Money Group LLC are separate entities and are not owned or controlled by Calton & Associates Incorporated.